Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Morning, Varisha.
Morning, ma'am. Morning, sir.
Okay. So now, Samir, you can start.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
So just 1 minute. So is my presentation visible?
Yes.
So, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, sir, Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Today I'm going to present the recap for yesterday, February 22. And let me start with the contents of the recap of my presentation. My presentation will be divided into three parts, which would be context at hand, which is the current context we're discussing, and power and authority. So, starting with the context at hand, yesterday, day before yesterday, we were discussing how yesterday we were connecting we were connecting matrix structure to the social aspect structure, and how ma'am gave an example that matrix structure or structure in organization would be called as the skeleton of the organization, which would be the actual hierarchy in an organization, which is visible to everyone and would be set up by chain of commands. This would usually consist of roles, titles, and designations. You know, the things which we would physically write somewhere on an official document or an official structure of the organization. On the other hand, we have influential capacities, which would be called as the flesh and nerves, because even though you may have a skeleton, you need flesh and nerves to control them and move them. So influential capacities would be the ability to utilize the structure, capacity to get the task done, because without influence, without socializing with people, you cannot get any task done, even though you may have a physical structure or an official structure. And this would be set up by anyone as a reaction to command, compared to skeleton, would be set up the higher ups, which will be set up by the higher ups as a chain of command. Influential capacity would be a reaction to command, whether it's from the lower management or the upper management. And this obviously is an abstract of psychological agreement between people. Both parties have to agree with each other to follow this command. If one doesn't accept it, the top management cannot influence others without the lower management accepting them. Now, I move on to power, which would be said as an informal influence. What would power be? Power would be the capacity to, in a definition, we would say, the capacity or ability to act in certain ways, impose your will on others. It doesn't have to be legally bounding, it doesn't have to be formally bounding, neither does it require authority, but can be developed internally within a person. A person may develop his power or informal influence over others over a period of time. It doesn't have to be given by others. It can be developed internally. There are many types of powers, but John French and Bertram Raven in 1959 named the five major types. Before I describe the five major types of power, they would be classified into positional or personal. Positional would be derived from an external source. Examples would be a person's position in an organization, their heritage, which will be hereditary, or the tradition that one follows, or diplomacy. Personal power would be derived from an internal source, or someone or something that one develops from within themselves. Their charisma, their experience, their knowledge, wisdom, etc., would all be examples of internal source. What would true power be? That would be a combination of both positional and personal. Why only personal is not true power? That will be understood later on. If I begin with positional powers first, let's get the elephant out of the room, and that would be legitimate power, capacity of imposing will on people by the virtue of their position or authority given to them. This obviously the is what would be naturally called as power or influence or authority, and is formally recognized by subordinates, and it works within a hierarchical structure. Since it works within hierarchical structures usually followed mostly in military, bureaucracy, or administration, and its effect is as long as the as long as the position exists. As long as you have the position, you have the legitimate power over people. Obviously, since this depends on a position, socially speaking or psychologically speaking, it won't be as effective on its own. You would have to complement it or combine it with some other power. Now, reward powers would be the capacity of giving rewards or benefits in exchange of results. Usually, this is in exchange of services. You pay someone in monetary forms or opinion forms or some other form to get them to influence to do some task. You either reward them by bonuses, you either give them praises or admiration, or sometimes you may even get their work easier done, give them leaves or have a public gathering. These are all abstract type of rewards as compared to monetary rewards, but in the end these are all reward powers where you exchange rewards in exchange for results. This has a short-term effect because obviously this has no commitment from the employee, from the person you're doing. As long as you give them rewards, you can get the results. They may or may not follow you as when you stop giving the rewards, but the rewards must be relevant. A positive reward for one may be a negative reward for another. For example, if you're giving someone social gatherings and he's in need of money, you may think it's a positive power from your perspective, but for him, he is in require of monetary needs or some other leaves. So for him, it's a negative power. On the third, we have coercive power, which would be defined as the capacity of imposing will through threats and repercussions. This can be from the top or even colleagues, because usually authority or power comes with some form of coercion. The forms of coercion could be threat of termination, disclosing unwanted information by colleagues, or even harassment within the organization. And this usually is a double-edged sword. It may seem effective short term, you may get tasks done, but in the longer terms, you will lose your public image, you will lose your relations with others. You may, for example, managers may even find it harder to retain their own employees. So in the longer term, there are larger losses. Now we have personal powers, powers developed within a person. This could be expertise power, the capacity of imposing will by virtue of one expertise, or what we call credibility. These credibility could be knowledge, either technical knowledge or social knowledge. You know, he's a more outgoing person. He has more technological experience. Experience could be work experience, where someone has worked for a long time and hence they have experience, or situational experience, that they were involved in so and so situation and hence they have the experience. It could also be wisdom, where by luck of chance or by some reasoning, when people give advice, their advice is effective and useful. So this also gives them expertise power, and this affects all levels of organization. It doesn't mean that if a person is at the lower end of the management that they may not have expertise. So this expertise is what drives influence over the top management's will. Sometimes the front management is more effective at certain tasks than the top management. So the top management will have to accept that power because the lower management has the expertise. And on the other end also, obviously on the top management, due to their situation and position, they also have expertise power because being involved in a lot of places. But this must be developed and constantly refined. Expertise power is something which you have to refine, otherwise it will be outmatched. But on the other hand, it's a long-term stable effect because expertise can be outmatched but not destroyed. You cannot destroy someone's expertise. You cannot destroy their knowledge. You can outmatch them. You may find a person better than them, but obviously they don't lose that expertise that they gained over the year. Examples given yesterday where, for example, AMU's finance officer, since he deals with all the financial data in AMU, naturally he gains a financial expertise within AMU. So, and on the other hand, we have referent power, the capacity of imposing will by virtue of admiration of one's followers, or what we call influences. Referent power is is a truly abstract power and one of the most powerful influences, which is bestowed on the person. You cannot develop, you cannot gain it, you cannot acquire it in any way. It's bestowed by the followers on the person being followed. Usually we have role models, someone who becomes a role model or a celebrity. This referent power is truly within the eyes of the followers. Only the followers bestow this power onto you, and you cannot acquire it in any way. And celebrities also sometimes association with influential people. Just being associated with influential people gives you some amount of referent power. It affects anyone, not just not just within an organization, but anywhere. Sometimes when you're associated with influential people, you may use that referral or referent power to get your jobs done. This referral or referring or being or what we say, मैं इससे ताल्लुक रखता हूँ, मेरे ताल्लुक यहाँ पर हैं. So this referent power is a completely abstract power. It's passively developed by other powers because you cannot you cannot focus on developing this single power. It's passively developed by other powers, whether it's through legitimate powers or whether it's through expertise powers. This power has a long-term retainment but a volatile effect. Opinions may change. Sometimes who were role models in one person's view may not be a role model anymore, but the lingering effect of them being a role model at some point in time remains. So opinions may change, but the effect lingers. Examples given yesterday were of the VC's registrar office. Anyone associated or working in the VC's registrar office gains a referral power just by virtue of being associated with VC's registrar office. Just because they work in VC's registrar office, they have some amount of command of getting jobs done. And now the question here would be, so 1 minute. Yeah. Another question here would be, are these just personal powers? Would one say these are just personal powers, or would they also be a virtue of their positional powers? Because one example yesterday given was, due to their positions, people gain expertise, and being involved in mental places, they gain expertise, and so this cannot be just said as a personal power. Same goes for referent power. Being involved in a lot of places, being holding positions, being given legitimate powers or other powers, one gains referent powers. So whether these are just personal powers, solely personal powers, or a combination of both personal and positional powers, that's up to the listeners. Now I move on to authority, which would be defined as, which would be called as formal influence. Authority would be defined as the formal and legal right that a person holds to make decisions and give commands. It gives one the ability to make organizational changes. It's usually tied with a hierarchy of a company or a structure or a social structure or a political structure. Any kind of structure is usually tied with a hierarchy. It flows downward, the delegation of command. From upper management, the command is delegated to middle management, which delegates to front management. Max Weber in 1922 divides authority into three measures. Before I go on to authority, one may ask, what is the difference between authority and power? Power is informally accepted by both parties. There is no written agreement anywhere that you must accept this command or you must accept one's command. On the other hand, authority is officially accepted, legally accepted by both parties. It's written in a document and they must both accept it. Power is a byproduct of authority. Authority validates power, and because just having power may not give you the legal command to do something, to get others to do a task, but authority validates power, and power comes from authority. And authority can be initiated by itself, but it's boosted by power. Just being a boss of someone doesn't make sure that people will follow your commands every time. That's where power comes in. So even though authority can be given by higher ups, it's usually boosted by power. And it's static. Authority is static because it exists as long as it is granted. It can be taken away, but it doesn't change as volatilely as compared to power. Power changes, opinions change, and it must be refined day in and out. Then we discussed three types of authorities. The three types of authorities would be first we start with traditional authority, which is legitimized by long-standing customs. Customs would be cultural, hereditary dominance of position. Customs would be rivaj, what we would say, or paramparas, what we say. This authority is given due to the investment of people in the past. People want to be associated with the past, and they feel that they have an obligation to fulfill that past. This obligation is the sole reason for traditional authority. May be defined as a weakness of traditional authority, but it is what it is. And race, class, and gender, these are the three major categories of traditional authority. Usually it was said, for example, it was said racial differences between people. That was a traditional authority. And class, most important would be class authority. How upper class would show their authority on the lower class. And gender differences also may be a leading cause for traditional authority. On its own, it has a negative effect because you don't have anything to back it up. For example, you may be a royalty, but if you don't have any other authority other than being a royalty, it may have a negative effect on others. And it's a long-term effect because it's accepted as long as the traditions are allowed. And because it's agreed upon by the people and the authorities. The people agree that these are traditionally the authorities, and we accept it. The examples given yesterday was of Sultan Balban, who wished to be called Zille-Ilahi, or what it would mean shadow of God, because he wanted his command to be accepted as the decree of God. This accepting of people as Zille-Ilahi would give him the traditional authority over people. Moving on, we have charismatic authority, which is legitimized by exceptional personal abilities, which inspire devotion and obedience within people. Just by people's characteristics or their interpersonal abilities, interpersonal skills, how they communicate, how they talk to people, this authority gives a command over people, whether or not they have the expertise. Expertise may be a factor, but the exceptional skills or the interpersonal skills, these are the power which drives charismatic authority over people. Now, charismatic may not mean morally just. That is to be noted, that charismatic may not be just because he's charismatic doesn't mean he is going towards a good, morally just cause, because charismatic people exist on both sides of the spectrum. This may be a short-term effect because it's inherently unstable. It's because it's agreed upon by the people subscribing to the person. As long as they think the person is charismatic, they feel they relate to the person, they will follow him. They will follow him to the end. But when they don't agree with him, they may stop giving this authority. So it's inherently unstable. One of the examples given yesterday was of Mahatma Gandhi ji. He never held a position in the International Congress. He never held a formal position in the National Congress, but was obviously a prominent authority in over decisions. They didn't make many decisions without his consideration. On the third hand, we have legal rational authority. This is legitimized by legal rules or regulations. This is mostly bureaucratic rather than individualistic. What that means is people are more invested in a system rather than the ideology. They don't know the persons or the people involved in the system. They only know that this system exists, and we agree that we will follow this system. It exists on all levels, whether it's national level, which would be the government, or an organizational level, which would be hierarchy of an organization. People agree that this is the hierarchy and this is the system, and we will accept it. One benefit of this is that it becomes a common ground for all people. People know that all types of people agree that this is the government and we follow them. All types of people all types of employees in an organization agree that these are the C-suits and we will follow them and we will agree with them. This has a long-term effect, that is until the regulations are accepted, because it's agreed by the people abiding to the regulations. As long as the people abide to the regulations, then they agree that this is the common ground for us, this authority exists. Now, one more term that was discussed yesterday was the evolution of authority. Classical authority would be a top-down authority which flows under hierarchy and this is the formal or the old authority, we would say. Every subordinate accepts this authority and he accepts the amount of power delegated to him. This is governed by the process of delegation, and every subordinate, whether it's in the middle management or the upper management, or they accept that this is the amount of power given to us. We don't have any more power than the power we are given. And disobedience is followed by coercive measures. Not because, as you can see in the figure beside me, there's either zone of indifference where people agree unjudgingly, or this rejection zone. Rejection zone would obviously mean punishments or coercive measures, but there is no in between these two. Now, zone of indifference was given by Chester Bernard, who made next theory of authority, which I'll discuss. But he said that there's a zone of indifference where people will unjudgingly accept the commands given to them or the authority given to them. Obviously, in classical authority, this was a small area. There was no questioning. There was either accepting or rejection. Rejection obviously meant coercive measures. Max Weber defined classical authority as the willing and unconditional compliance of people. That it is rightful for the superior to impose his will, and wrongful for them to obey, for refusal to obey. And do note the quote written down below, that power flows from the barrel of a gun, because it changes later on. In the acceptance authority, we have quite a lot changes. It's a bottom of authority which flows from the bottom to top. It's acceptance of authority by the subordinates. Let me note here, this was every subordinates accept the authority, and this was acceptance of authority by the subordinates. This means that when the subordinates accept the authority, only then the authority is valid. Otherwise, no matter how much the top management may want, the authority is not accepted. So acceptance vests management with authority, and the flow of authority now, rather as a command, is a request by the tops. If the request is rejected by the subordinates, there is no authority. Chester Bernard defined acceptance authority as the character of communication by virtue of which it is accepted by a member of the organization as governing. In simple terms, if the subordinates or member of an organization accepts the authority, it is authority. Simple as that. Now, if you can see the figure side below, before there was no questioning zone. Now there's a questioning zone, because when a command or a task is given, now people question whether it's right or wrong. They don't reject it outright or accept it. They have a right to question people कि क्या भाई ये सही है या नहीं. One example I was given yesterday was, if a teacher says that I'm taking class on 3 a.m., would that be acceptable? Would that be in the zone of indifference? No, people may or may not accept it. Obviously, would consider it outright outrageous. So the court has changed from the power flows from the barrel of a gun to, but the pen is mightier. The ideas are mightier. The question and the reasoning is mightier. Now, how all of this connects? Power, it can start from anywhere. Power gives influence over people, which gives better results. Better results lead to authority granted by the people or the higher-ups. Authority validates power, because power obviously is informal, not formal, but authority is formal. So authority validates power. Power boosts authority and is validated by authority. And this cycle repeats on, where power gives better results. Better results means authority given. Authority given is boosted by power. So this is how all the three are connected. Now, before closing, I would like to give a visual recap of what we just said. In the first photo, we have influence of power, where the leader is in the front and he has influenced the people behind him enough to get involved in the work. On the other hand, down below, we have influence of authority, where he is not involved in the work being done. But rather directing others to do the task. You may argue that this is the difference between manager or leader, or leading or controlling. That is up to you. But you may also argue that there's powers and authority involved in both areas. That is also up to you. But this was a visual recap of what were given. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Do we have Gulshan Kumar? I don't see.
No, sir, he is not. He wasn't there in the class even yesterday.
Has he left the course?
I'm not sure, sir. I'll have to check in the office.
So this presentation by Samir Siddiqui,
Yes, sir.
it was a well prepared and thoroughly researched presentation, and delivered also in a lucid manner. He has good command over language.
Thank you, sir.
My only concern is that every task is situational, isn't it? Like you ended up consuming almost 20 minutes for this presentation,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and in fact more than 20 minutes. So that's my only concern. Your job is to provide a recap of what we have discussed, and there is a time limit for that, that is 5 minutes. So it got extended too much.
Yes, sorry, sir.
So that is something which we need to control. And my second observation is regarding your slides. They were very good
Thank you,
and
sir.
well prepared. But I wish the font size selection was more appropriate. Some of the content, especially on the initial slides, it was not readable because of rather a small font size.
Okay, sir.
And but we compliment you for your preparation
Thank you,
and
sir.
the effort that you made for this. And let's have a look at these 2 points which I was mentioning.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Time management, and second, uh, in PPTs, make sure that they are readable because they are for others. And sometimes what happens is when we have a look at our PPTs, because we see it from a close distance, uh, it may be readable to us, but you have to ensure that audience they read it
Yes, sir.
because it is for them. Okay, thank you. Then Zareen ma'am, you can start the presentation for you.
Thank you, sir. Today we shall be discussing line and staff authority. What does line and staff authority means? How does it work? Um, so the traditional hierarchy where we have a CEO, we have the vice president, we have production manager, maybe we have people working under production manager. The traditional hierarchy could be the line authority, which is in charge of essential activities, and the line authority is also directly responsible for achieving the organizational goals. Like I just said, it is represented by standard chain of command, the chain of command which is being followed in the organization. And the line authority, the managers falling in the line authority, they are authorized to issue orders to essential activities for essential activities to their in the light of the standard chain of command. So this is line authority, and the relationship between an employee and supervisor or manager who has an authority is, like I just said, is to issue direct orders to the employees who is in the chain of command, which the employee must follow. Also, the line authority could also reflect the superior subordinate relationship, which is characterized by the power of decision making, because on that basis the standard chain of command rests. So another thing is that the it is reflecting a subordinate and superior relationship that is characterized by the power of decision making, because of which the higher authority is able to take the decision and able to communicate it or to direct or issue order to its subordinates. Now, if we see the line and staff organization, the line and staff organization is a structure. The line is the authority is there. Now when staff authority is introduced in the structure, the line and staff organization becomes a structure that distributes work responsibilities. And for example, you would be able to understand better this way. For example, we have CEO, we have vice president, and we have maybe having production manager. Production manager must be delineating work to his subordinates. So let us take an example of production manager. Now, if a production manager needs to take a decision regarding a concern about production, or maybe regarding the cost of raw materials, so he must be taking advice, he must be taking support, and he must be taking specialized services, maybe from his accountants, maybe from people who are cost accountant, so that the production manager may become well aware of the production cost, or maybe the demand of the product, or various issues. So people who are providing him advice, who are supporting him in his function, those could be called as staff authority. So basically staff are those who provide services, who provide advice to line managers. They could be called as supportive function, which the basic intention of them is to provide good advice, good support to the line managers. And the staff authority, they focus more on improving the effectiveness of the decision making of line managers, so that the whole duty which is to be performed could be performed effectively, and the whole goals of the organizations could be met in a more effective manner, in a more efficient manner. Many a times planning advice is given through research, through analysis, through development of options. So that is also a service which is provided by staff through their advisors. We can also take example of like I just took an example of the production manager. We can also take example of any authority, maybe in our university as well. For example, there's a chairman in a department. So maybe the chairman would also need advice many a times in maybe organizing a program, how to take care of finances, how to maybe if they have to open an account for a workshop, for a conference, then also they might need advice. So they would be taking advice from different sources. So, and the people who are right under them in the chairman office, those could be also behave as staff for them, who may be typing letter, who may have worked in other departments, and who may be knowing how the chairman could complete a task, or organize an event. So they may be taking advice from their assistants also, from the chairman office. So that way they could be considered as a staff, the people who are in the chairman office. In case of vice chancellor, we can also assume the same thing. He may also be taking advice from his finance officer, or maybe the legal section, or maybe from the academic section on various fronts. If there is a case which is going on, maybe university has a case on regarding some issue, maybe property issue or any issue. So the vice chancellor shall be taking advice from the legal section, or from the person who is in charge of the property. So he has to take advice, and the main function of the advisors, these specialists whom we're calling as staff, is to provide him a right direction, is to help him manage his work more effectively. So this is what basically line and staff authority would mean. So if we come to the features of line and staff authority, we can say that it improves the form of organization. It will help the work get easier. Also, it helps in proper evaluation while taking a decision. It helps in proper evaluation of all the options which are being considered. At the same time, when a specialist is giving advice to the line manager, staff is helping, assisting line manager, then the decision making capacity also increases, because they can take decision faster, they can take more effective decisions, more more decisions which are foolproof from all the fronts. Definitely, this kind of structure provides information for decision making. So managerial problems could be solved. At the same time, there could be less wastage of time, less wastage of resources, right? Because they are not experimenting trial and error method. They are taking decision with full discussion and evaluating all the possible options. So there would be less wastage of time and resources. And since the services are being provided by a specialist, the greater focus is on the core responsibilities, that everybody would be responsible for his own specialized area, and the greater focus is on the core responsibility. Now, when two when these two authorities work together, then definitely conflicts also occur. Line and staff conflicts refers to disagreements many a times between a line manager and a staff manager. A staff manager who is providing him advice, who is trying to help him, who is trying to assist him. So there could be conflict between these two as well. For example, like I just mentioned earlier, for example, there's a production manager and he is seeking advice from maybe cost accountant on some issue, and cost accountant is suggesting him that product X should be produced because it is providing maybe highest margins and it is valuable to sell. But maybe production manager is not in favor of that. So in that case, there would be a conflict between production manager and the cost accountant, who is staff. That and one more thing, line managers may take advice from staff managers, but they are not. It is up to them whether they agree to it or whether they do not agree to it, right? Because they are the authority. They have to take. They are the decision makers. So in this light, many a times conflicts may occur. And other sources of conflicts could also happen because many a times people who are decision makers, who are a line authority, they are more experienced. They are many a times older in age, and people who are maybe providing them a specialized service maybe could be young in age, could be it is possible that they have newly joined the organization. So in that aspect also, there's a issue which occurs that the line authority feels that he is junior, he is advising me, and a kind of a feeling appears that a junior is advising me. How should I accept his advice? This kind of feelings also occur many a times because of the difference in age, experience. Also, line managers expect from staff managers to constantly prove themselves. They treat staff as agents on trial, who are constantly being trialed, who are supposed to prove themselves constantly. So that time also the conflict appears, because line managers start feeling that he has to prove himself every time. So his staff managers start feeling that he has to prove himself every time. Also, when staff managers advise line managers start feeling that the staff manager is sort of encroaching on their duties and responsibilities. They are also maybe becoming a part of the credit or the advice. They may also somehow steal the credit. They are unable to see the whole picture, the teamwork. This feeling happens. This feeling occurs, and many a times staff views line managers as bullheaded, who many a times do not give line authority enough authority, and because of which line authority resist new ideas. So these are some possibilities, some scenarios because of which conflicts may uh, occur between line and staff authority. Now, um, how can we overcome this? How can we help these conflicts not happen? See, staff should know his clear and necessary function. The staff should be knowing that maybe limits as well when they are speaking to line managers. They should be sure that what they are responsible for, they should leave the authority, they should leave the decision making with the line managers, and they should be very much clear what they are responsible for. And it is also important that people occupying staff positions are carefully selected. They should be very high on interpersonal skills. They should be very much have the feeling to give advice and to help others work, and many a times, yes, to take credit also. They should have the magnanimity of genuinely giving others the credit. So these kind of this all happens because of interpersonal skills, the behavior, the attitude one carries. All may not have these qualities. And it is also important that the line and staff, to avoid these conflicts, the use of staff, excessive use of staff must be avoided. Unnecessary use of staff must be avoided, so that the staff services may not be used for each purpose, for every purpose, only when needed, when required. So this will all help in avoiding conflicts, and the line and staff authority would be working more effectively and efficiently towards the achievement of organizational goals. Um, Sir, would you like to add anything to it?
Just one point, you have already covered major points. So that, I mean, generally the staff is required either because of the size of the work or because of their unique expertise. Like in the Vice Chancellor's office, the Vice Chancellor can't maintain his diary because he gets so many requests to, let us say, meeting with the other person. So because volume of work is so much that maybe he requires some assistance, personal assistance. And so that is fair enough. But for example, I as a teacher or even chairman of the department can manage his own engagements. So only when size requires, then only we should use the staff. And the second thing for which the staff is required is some expert advice. Now here also the attitude of the staff is, when you are hired as an expert, that you are on the tape. you are not on the top. Like for example, when the advice is needed, like water tape, you open its knob and you get the water. But if you try to be on the top, this is my advice and this is an expert advice. So for example, the Vice Chancellor may need advice on minority case which is being pursued in Supreme Court. But ultimately, Vice Chancellor is the decision maker. So he can get the advice from anyone and everyone. But ultimately, he has to decide which lawyer to engage, how to argue the case in the court. Isn't it? So this leeway, I would say, the staff should give to the line authority. And when this leeway is not given and that Lakshman Rekha is crossed, then only the conflicts arise. So, for example, I am the marketing manager. I may need advice from HR. For example, what kind of psychological tests I should administer on the new incumbents. That's fine, and I may accept their advice. But I may not accept their advice. I may go by my own intuition and judgment. So, only when size demands, we should use staff. And second, when the staff is hired for a specialist role, the staff's responsibility is that they should know where their position is. So whenever that borderline is crossed, then the problem arises. So if that can be controlled, I think this arrangement of line and staff will work in the organization, work well in the organization. Sometimes the point that Zareen ma'am was making about the staff being young, especially for many technical roles, like for example nowadays the manager may need a lot of assistance on IT matters, IT related matters. And generally these people are young and they are more tech savvy, for example. But manager who has been hardened by years of experience, I mean, he may have his own way of looking at it. So somehow the two have to interweave in such a manner that yes, the line manager may need advice, but that advice should be given in the spirit of take it or leave it. It should not be in the spirit of this is my word on this and last word on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.